Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the From Adversity to Abundance podcast. I am your host, Jamie Bateman, and today I'm delighted to have a special guest with us, Bryan Chavis of Buy It, Rent It, Profit Education. Bryan's got an extremely moving story, and I know we're going to dive into that. Bryan, how are you doing today?
I'm blessed, man. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Now, where are you joining us from, Bryan?
Tampa, Florida.
Okay, nice. I was in Tampa in March.
Okay.
Nice, for a mortgage note event, actually two different events, and we went to the other coast after the Tampa one. But for our listeners out there, I know you have a pretty good sized following, but for our listeners who are unfamiliar with you, who are you and what are you up to today?
Yeah. Who am I? A father, a husband, an entrepreneur. I guess my profession or my skill sets is multifamily. Been in the space for probably close now, let's just say well over 2 decades. Started in the apartment industry, the multifamily space. Started my journey on educating and consulting in that industry as a instructor for the National Apartment Association, teaching their designations and training. So it's kind of how I morphed into, the Buy It, Rent It, Profit, formerly known as the Landlord Academy. How I morphed into that space and writing books and things of that nature, kind of all generated from the multifamily industry to the coaching and consulting and education space platform that we have now, which is known as Buy It, Rent It, Profit Education. But yeah,
Perfect.
the W-2, the entrepreneurial passion is the multifamily space.
Got it.
Yep.
And so what's, just before we dive into your backstory, what's a typical week look like for you?
Typical week. So up, eyes open around 3:30, 3:20, 3:30, 4 a.m. up. And I usually try to just focus on, I'll give it to you. I like Joel Osteen. So, if I'm not doing something out of the Bible app, some sort of, you can do a lot of lessons out of this app. There's a lot of great lessons in there. For entrepreneurs, you can grab entrepreneurs. So I'll listen to that and let that soak in. So, sometimes whether it be Joel Osteen, I'll let that soak in. So I'll do that for about 45 minutes, and then I get started with the grind. Midday is usually the Peloton, then I usually start winding it down right around 3:00 when I pick up my first little one from school, Judah, and the phone goes from active to that personal setting on if you got an iPhone, that personal setting, it goes to that personal setting where it's kind of, I'm hard to get a hold of after 3:00. Then I'm in that space of being a father and a husband. We usually make it to the Y. Usually the Y on the weekends for the classes for exercise, and then Mondays are our pipeline days where we're looking at projects and deals, and Tuesdays are Buy It, Rent It, Profit, solely based on Buy It, Rent It, Profit education. We're meeting with the team and we're working on curriculum, working on coaching or consulting, and working on our various different packages and projects that we have there. Wednesdays are my golf days where sometimes I'll meet with, who's in the passenger seat here is Dr. Danny, who's our director of acquisitions at Chavis Capital. So we'll meet for about a half hour. Then we usually go into golf tech and practice. Thursdays is pretty much all podcasts and the live Zoom trainings that I do and the consulting that I do. Fridays are my personal day. So that's usually consists of doing, sometimes in the morning, one-on-one calls with a lot of our coaching clients and things. I have those that day scheduled for that. Mid-morning after those calls, mid-afternoon, then it's back to golf. I'm usually at Golf Tech or actually depending on the weather, at the golf course. And then I usually getting my practice in. And my goal there is to qualified for a U.S. Open qualifier this year. So, I'm always
Nice.
always golfing somewhere, always in the back of my
Gotcha.
mind.
Yeah.
So
There
no
you
matter
go.
what I'm doing, it's applicable.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. Yeah.
yep.
My wife and I just did 5 golf lessons, and now I understand what I what I can't
Yes,
do.
my advice would be stay away. Just play
Yeah.
the 2K23 the Tiger Woods video game. You want to get
There you go.
off.
Yeah.
It's a
I've
tough
avoided
sport.
it. I've avoided it my whole life because, I knew that I would want to get good, and that requires time and money,
A lot of
and
time.
a lot of time. And but yeah, it was fun. We'll see where it goes, but that's awesome. You sound like you're pretty structured, and more that you have your priorities, defined, and therefore your schedule kind of
Yeah,
it
now it had
goes
always been
around that.
the case, but over time you evolve, and and you hope to evolve over time. That's the goal.
Sure.
But yeah, it always I haven't always been structured, haven't always been as focused. But
Hmm.
yeah,
Gotcha.
events and that we'll talk about things that happen to you.
Yeah.
The idea is to evolve
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah,
and get
let's
better.
let's dive in. I know you've told your story once or twice before, but if you would, jump back to whatever year you'd like, and we'll start and go through kind of chronologically some of the adversity that you've been through on the personal side, and we'll see what lessons learned we can pull out for our listeners, and go from there. So, I think from what I know, you're the ideal guest for this show. I typically throw in the
I don't know how
qualifier
to
that
take that.
hey,
I don't know
well,
if that's a
we'll
good
see.
thing for
No.
adversity, or is that a bad thing to be an ideal guest for your show?
Well, it is. It's not only adversity though; it's also to abundance. So,
There you go. Cool.
and I usually throw in the qualifier that look, everyone's story is different. We're trying to avoid, straight up comparison where, oh, this guy's adversity was worse than this person's adversity, and but the reality is you've been through some real hardship and trying times that we're going to dive into, and then um, and I also throw in the qualifier that look, we don't just snap our fingers and now we're magically in all abundance and we get to play golf 24/7 and we have no challenges. So with that said, uh, where would you like to start?
Well, I mean, it's your show, so I'll let you guide. But just on the topic of adversity, you're right. I mean, even before the brain tumor, there was always adversity. I think I don't know. Some people are gifted. Some people are blessed. Whatever it is, whatever your faith. Some say anointed. Some say blessed. Some say lucky. It
Hmm.
all depends on your perspective and how you look through the lens. But
Hmm.
there's some people in life that that some of us, some of your listeners, are gonna look and be like, yeah, that's my Uncle Joe, or that's my best friend Tommy. Everything's easy for them.
Hmm.
They're never faced with any adversity. There's those
Hmm.
individuals like that, and then there's individuals like myself that seem that adversity just seem to knock or
Define you.
be on their doorstep. It's like
Yeah.
a constant guest, that guest you can't get rid of, right?
Mm.
That's when you and I were talking before in the green room about David Goggins. Why I kind of
Hmm.
liked
Hmm.
some of the things that he was saying is because that's the I guess that's the journey he's on. It's never been an easy journey, and so it's
Hmm.
just like his
Yeah.
philosophy is smash it right in the mouth. And I resonate with that. Everybody has different perspective. I'm never going to get out and run 100 miles unless somebody's chasing me. So that's just not necessarily my thing. I do like
Sure.
to exercise, obviously,
Yeah.
but everybody approaches what they've had to go through. And I'm no stranger to that. Me in the beginning is battling um, the educational space, graduating late, 19 years
Mm.
old, with a special diploma, meaning the people make in front of the person that drives the short bus to school.
Mm.
That
Hmm.
was me. I was on the short bus. If it
Hmm.
wasn't for basketball, I would have graduated, honestly, high school. So thank God for the sport of basketball at that time. It allowed me to get out and also get into college. when I definitely didn't really belong or qualify to get into school. Back then they had things called Prop 48. So, I did that because I didn't pass the SATs. But so things have always been a struggle. But the main struggle that I think, your guest will identify, and I'll preference this real quick. I always say I've never passed an English class. I failed probably every English class I've ever taken through high school. But yet, at the end of the day, you can't walk into any bookstore pretty much in the world and not go to the real estate section and find me. So you can't go to the U.S. Library of Congress and not find me. So at the end of the day, I'm not saying this to brag. I'm saying this to your, as a preference to adversity. Is I wasn't a brilliant student. Yes, I was a special education, and hey, I was the butt of a ton of jokes, through high school. But like I said, fast forward to where we are today, walking in any bookstore, and a lot of those people that were naysayers, a lot of those people that laughed about being on the short bus to school, a lot of them ain't laughing now. Like I said, you ain't gonna find none of them on any bookshelf, on any anywhere.
That's
so
awesome. You clearly made something of yourself for sure, and made a major impact.
Right. So adversity is, we're familiar. It's that's So the overcoming the challenges, we're I thought at that time that that was like that was the challenging part of who Bryan Chavis was. And then in 2012 on Christmas Eve, I was went to Disney with then my fiance, and I guess I got sick. I got the flu at Disney. Came home and got some flu medicine, laid that on the couch. She went out to get some stuff for Christmas dinner, and I had a major seizure. Christmas Eve, rushed to the hospital. Find out on Christmas Eve in 2012 that I had a brain tumor. Not only a brain tumor, because they say a lot of people are walking around with brain tumors and don't know it. Dr. Danny, who's in the passenger seat here, is a physician. Probably can articulate more than I can. But mine in particular was on my motor cortex, hence the surgery or the seizures, and affected everything on my left hand side. So, I had to deal with that and continue to run a business and operate with having these seizures on a daily basis, and then eventually 3 or 4 of them, on a daily basis, going through battling chemo, which I wouldn't wish that on my enemies. And still having to maintain and try to maintain a business and a speaking tour. When I got sick and was on chemo, a lot of folks had to cancel, and I had to cancel a lot of engagements. So there was a struggle of not only having cancer, but also the financial toll that dealing with this has on an individual. So faced with a ton of adversity at this time back in 2012.
Absolutely. I mean, so if you would set the stage a little bit for us as far as prior to Christmas Eve, what was, you mentioned it, your businesses already, but what did your life look like? You mentioned your businesses and your fiance, but kind of what was going on prior to Christmas Eve at that point?
I mean, things were great. At least I thought they were. And you realize how, again, what lens you're looking through. I think I was comfortable. I think I was complacent. But things were well. The book was doing well. I mean, Buy It, Rent It, Profit is one of those books where it's the reason why they love it is because it's something that's timeless. So it's always done well. Speaking engagements were doing well. I was on the outside looking in. I was doing well. It wasn't until getting sick and having to look through different lenses that I realized that I could probably be doing so much more. So I think, on the outside, but really, was I, but, that's, again, that's, not knowing what was coming up in 2012 on Christmas Eve, if you ask me, I would say I'm doing absolutely great.
Right. Got it. So, and obviously we're not going to spend the entire time on Christmas Eve and those hours and days. And that's the risk with this show is we gloss over so much pain and struggle that you went through. But the fact is, that was obviously an extremely difficult time. What was going through your mind just in those immediate the immediate days there, that first week, say?
Man, I wish I could tell you, and really articulate it to your viewers, but I can't because, a lot of it is stuff that you kind of put towards the back.
Mhm.
You have to kind of compartmentalize because it's
Mm.
so much trauma.
Mhm.
So like to sit here and to kind of really,
Yeah, I
like
understand.
go through those files is
I say I
extremely
understand, I
difficult.
don't fully
But
understand, but
yeah,
I
I
I
know.
get what
I
you're
get it. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, everybody's faced with some sort of trauma where they, whether it's
Yeah,
childhood trauma or whatever it is, abuse or substance
sure.
abuse, whatever it may be. Everybody has something that they put away,
Yeah,
and that's the only way you can move forward. But at the time, I know it was just a struggle
sure.
altogether. Everything was a struggle.
Gotcha.
Trying to maintain the business, trying to maintain your health, not knowing if you're going to be around. Um,
Mm.
in a few months, and no one was wanting to at this time. No one was wanting to touch the tumor. It was more so
Mhm.
let's try to maintain it
Mhm.
because it was on my motor cortex. Meaning, if they removed it, they would
Mhm.
paralyze me.
Mhm.
And so no one really wanted to do it. And so I was in that period of having the chemo and seeing if the chemo could keep it where it was without it
Mhm.
growing. And so it was a lot of that. It was a lot of the going to Moffitt. And I know a lot of people, and I'm not knocking Moffitt, but my experience wasn't great. A lot of the feedback I was getting was just negative. It might have just been, who I spoke to at the time or the physician I spoke to at the time, but it wasn't. I can remember it damn sure wasn't encouraging.
I'm
I can
sorry, where
remember
where
leaving
what
there.
was that were you referring to?
Moffitt Cancer
Oh,
Center.
okay, got it, yep.
I'm
Yep,
there and dealing with the consultants and speaking to
yeah,
them, and I can just remember the news wasn't all that great.
gotcha.
Um, and and uh, and so the idea of what would happen if
Mhm.
they removed it and how I would be in the state of mind I would be in wasn't
Mhm.
really. I'm not trying to be a vegetable. I'm not trying to have someone change my diapers and feed me, and especially a
Yeah.
fiance who was young and had a great career herself. So the
Mhm.
idea at that time was, do I go out like that or do I go out on my own terms? I
Mhm.
think we kind of all know what I'm talking about. And so it was
Mhm.
all I was constantly dealing with that
Mm.
struggle of
Mm.
go out on my own terms or do
Mm.
I risk it? And again, the feedback that I'm getting at the time from the physicians, it wasn't weighing on the favor of, oh, let's stick around. Let's see how the cards play out.
Mhm.
And then one day there's these guys I used to live in a place in Tampa called Davis Island, really nice spot.
Mhm.
And every month these two young men, I think they were Jehovah Witnesses, would always stop by, knock on my door, and I would remember always um, giving them water and just having brief conversations with them before I was like walking out to the golf course or going wherever I was going at the time.
Mhm.
And always short conversations, but I would always make sure I gave them some water and just have, just brief conversation. I
Mhm.
remember this time they knocked on my door and I really didn't want to see them. At this time, I was
Mm.
set in my mind that I was going to deal with things my way. I'm going to go out on my terms. So
Mhm.
I was dead set on walking out the door, and I was on my way out the door. And of course, I opened up the door, and these two are sitting on my doorstep. They're coming up the stairs. I'm like, oh shit, yeah, this is not. Oops, excuse me. This
Yes,
is not. I don't want to see these two.
right.
So anyway, they start talking, and we have this conversation. They can see it on my face that I wasn't really in any mood. And so
Weren't
one of them
receptive.
asked,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of them asked me, who never talks, what's going on, and I mentioned to him what was going on, and
Mhm.
he was like, man, you gonna make these type of decisions based on what a man thinks, or what, even if he is a physician, he's just a physician.
Mm.
He can only
Mhm.
give you his opinion.
Mm.
You're gonna make this decision, and I guess he can just read it on my face what my decision had been. So you're
Mm.
gonna make a decision that you can't come back from based on an individual. What
Mm.
he's like, the little bit we know about you, you've never been a person that did anything, took anybody's opinion and made it set in stone,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
now you're going to do that. And so it was a little bit more detailed than that and back and forth in the conversation, but I can just remember um going, you know what, yeah, that sounds about right. Maybe these doctors don't know everything.
Sure.
And so just giving you the Reader's Digest version, long story short,
Sure.
somebody from Tampa General Hospital, great physician out of there, said, hey, listen, I can map his brain. I think I can make a run at it. He's an athlete, he's in great shape.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can make a run at it. I think we can remove the tumor. He will be paralyzed, but I think he can get it back. So again, just imagine this. We're going to cut you open. You're going to be awake, by the way, during surgery. While we're taking this brain tumor out of your head, you're going to be awake and you're going to be paralyzed on the table.
Wow.
No, not even afterward. You're going to feel yourself go numb and lose your extremities on the table. But you look like you're in shape. So we're gonna
oh my gosh. I just can't even. I don't mean to laugh.
I'm being funny. That wasn't. It's not the conversation. I mean, it's much more technical. They map your brain. They give you odds and statistics, but it's basically like, if for my golfers out there, it's basically like, well, it's a 15-mile-an-hour headwind. You got an 8-iron in your hand, you can hit, it's a 50-50 chance we're going to make the green, but more likely we're going to, so it doesn't look good. It's like, it doesn't look good. So,
and this was how long approximately after?
So this was, 2012. So 2014 is when they decided. So I had to spend up to 2 years with it in my head, dealing with these seizures, going through chemo. Drastically losing my business and losing a lot of my revenue, because a lot of it revolved around me physically coaching, and teaching, and speaking, and book signing, and all these things. So without me being on the road and doing, obviously you can understand how the bills are piling up. And also chemo, for every dosage $10,000. Just keep that in mind. Over 2 years, how many dosages, multiple dosages I had to take. You can do the math. The surgeries are millions of dollars. So it's just, and that was the exploratory surgery, just for the guy to cut it open and say, oh, this is what we're dealing with, sew you back up, send you on your way,
to come up with some options or a potential plan.
Right.
850. So, whoa.
Yeah, that's just the surgery. I mean, I don't count the, the stay in the hospital and all the various things. So you can understand what's going on and what you're dealing with. And so, so now you fast forward to 2014. There's a guy that, Dr. Jagal. Is it Jagal? I want to remember his name, and I wish I could off the top of my head. Like I said, I'm sorry, but a lot of this you kind of put in the back and lock it away. Absolutely. But Dr. Jagal was my oncologist. The physician that did it was I forgot his name, but he was a Puerto Rican doctor. I wish I remembered his name, but really cool dude. Took a chance, said, I think I can do it. We're going to do this exploratory way of what is it, anesthesiologist, Dr. Danny. They came up with this new way of doing the anesthesia, and I don't know how to say it. Am I saying it right? Anesthesia. Yeah, that. They came up with a way to numb me or whatever that stuff does, and so they brought in this team, and then when they woke me up on the table, and they already had my head, they already had me open. There's the guy that does the anesthesiologist, right? Am I saying it right? There's him, and then there's the doctor that was removing the tumor.
The surgeon.
The surgeon, and then a bunch of students right there at the feet of my. That's why if you look on my social media feed, you can see they took a picture of me and I'm awake. And I smiled on purpose when they took the picture. But they removed the tumor. They did paralyze me. Eventually it took some time for me to get everything back. And I had to learn how to walk, talk, brush my teeth, do all the various different things again. And as the doctor thought, I did eventually gain those things back. But I remember removing myself out of the physical therapist and deciding to really just do my own physical therapy. And I figured I knew my body better than anybody. And so I started on my own path on trying to get myself back. But yeah, man, over that time, it just was a lot of reflection and a lot of understanding, a lot of testing of the faith.
Sure.
I was always somewhat religious. I always believed in God. I always believed that, hey, but then, obviously going through this, you think to yourself, well, what kind of God would, why am I praying to this particular God when everything around every corner has just been bad news after bad news? What kind of God is this that I've been praying to for the last, 30 years,
Sure. It's
so,
easy to
you go
believe
through
when
that.
things are, Yeah, it's easy to be a believer when things are going well, right?
Oh God, isn't it? Isn't that the statement of so much easier just to, to get
Yeah,
along with God and when everything is going really well. But like David
sure.
Goggins says, these are preparations. He wanted something for you better, but he couldn't get it to you, and you can't really share the message with things being so easy.
Mm.
The
Hmm.
world doesn't need individuals. I mean, we can see this with the lack of leadership. No matter
Hmm.
what side of the aisle you're on, left, right,
Sure.
there's a lack of leaders all the way across the board. There's a lack of leadership across, in every
Yeah.
party. It's just leadership is just, and no longer it's in short order. And
Yeah.
so I think the preparation of, and really in order to lead effectively, you would
Hmm.
have to have suffered. You have to
Sure.
have some sort of experience. No, who's going to follow somebody where the
Hmm.
life has been of ease? You can't
Cakewalk.
really,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, where it's been a cakewalk. So it's very difficult.
So what was 2014 kind of, and again, we're glossing over so much, but how long did it take you to get, kind of back to kind of your pre Christmas
Never,
Eve 20?
never.
Never.
I mean, I've
Okay.
I be honest with you, man. There's days where I mean, can I move my hands and do all that?
Mm.
Absolutely. But it was my
Okay.
speech 100% back. No, I still feel like I slur certain words,
Mm.
especially if I get hot. If I'm on the
Mm.
golf course and things are really hot, there's days where you'll slur your words, and because you're over. There's headaches, and
Hmm.
you're never back. But
Gotcha.
ultimately, I'm here. I get to
So
spend time with my kids and pick them up and do the things. But no, you're never 100% back.
got it. So it's been essentially 10 years that you've been dealing with this,
Yes, correct.
almost. Um, so now, just before I fire off some other questions, how did you treat your business? What changes have you made to your business? You mentioned you were such an integral part of your business with speaking engagements and all that. Um, I imagine now, since you're able to set aside time to golf and be with your family and everything, I imagine you have quite a different structure than you had in 2012, from a business standpoint. How's the difference? What's
It's
the difference?
I would say it's still similar. I'm still driven. I'm still required of the business, very much
Hmm.
so. It's just um, when you decide to prioritize and you decide to put goals in front of you, you'll be amazed how you can organize and become more structured. I think
Hmm.
everybody feels like, hey, no, I'm doing things, I'm complacent, I'm now you can get
You
more
can you
structured.
can do
Yeah,
more. Yeah,
you can get hyper focused. So I don't think, the business still, you're an entrepreneur, the business still requires time.
sure.
It's like, well, while you're sleeping, you got to remember I'm up.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
when you're saying, am I really less involved? No. But I found more hours because I'm up at 3:30 when you're still sleeping. Your eyes are closed. I'm up at 3:30. So
yeah,
you
yeah.
you'd be surprised that you listen a lot what Kobe Bryant says and how he approached practice and how he approached his craft, and
Hmm.
you realize that, man, listen, Kobe was on his third practice by the time people roll into their first practice.
Sure,
That he
sure.
found time, and so you'll be surprised when you get disciplined, you have a passion,
Yeah,
the time, you begin to get a little bit more structured, and you find the
yeah.
time necessary to do the things you want to do.
Got it.
It
No, it
may,
makes a
but
lot.
the problem is it requires great sacrifice. See, a
Mm.
lot of folks don't like sacrifice; they like to be comfortable. What I mean, there's not. It's like
Yeah,
that's fine because
yeah,
the brain and the body naturally, for its survival,
sure.
seeks the path of less resistance and seeks
Yeah,
to be comfortable. That's how you
absolutely.
survive, ideally, right? So it's
Sure.
a fight against everything that your DNA. It's a fight against everything that you're brought up to believe in to be able to do it. But once you start tapping into that, yeah, you realize that you find time for those things, and that sometimes some of the stuff that you thought needed to require your time wasn't really all that important. And
Yeah,
so you start seeking your passion versus a paycheck or profit,
yeah,
and you begin to restructure. And when you really understand and have one foot in the grave and the other on a banana peel, do you really understand how fragile and how that chase of the almighty dollar really it's not saying it's important, not important, but how
Right.
you have to kind of reposition and restructure your mindset on how to bring that income in. And that takes a lot of structure, that takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a hell of a lot of sacrifice. And that's why many don't ever really achieve it, because
Mm.
they can't put those things together.
So it sounds like this, if we had to draw out what your approach and your life and your business, how it looked pre 2012 or pre December 2012 versus now, what I'm hearing is that you got very clear on your priorities and and maybe added some more structure, probably over time, maybe not overnight, but over time added
Correct.
more over
Over time.
more structure to your life. I mean, you just mapped out, every week. I'm sure certain weeks and days are different, obviously, but um, what else would you say is just, I guess, just if you had to pick, one or two lessons learned from all this adversity, what would you say those are?
I mean, there's. I wish honestly, I wish you could give one or two. There is no one or two lessons.
Sure.
That's a bunch of horse. Hey, look, here's 5 steps. Here's 3 lessons.
No.
It's
Yeah, and I'm not saying the most important or the only one, but just, I'm sure there's 10 lessons or 20 or 30, but just,
here. This is what the bottom line is to keep moving forward. There is no my lessons and my steps and the way I put it together in my
mhm,
chronological order to make it
mhm,
work for me is going to be different than what it would be for what you're facing. You might have I
sure.
have 2 children. You might have 6.
Mhm,
It's I might be an entrepreneur, you might be an entrepreneur as well as have a full-time job at W2. your
mhm,
your circumstances, everybody, your listeners' circumstances is going to be different. So I'm not going to
sure.
try to say here's some things, and this is what I will say is that discipline and the sacrifice, and
Mhm,
and like I said, moving forward, putting those
yeah.
things together, restructuring, and having some sort of faith base
Mhm,
that you can lean on,
yeah.
even though it's a trial and error, and even though, like I said, to this day I still ask why and have questions.
Sure.
But trying to be grounded in something greater than myself, and
Yeah.
having faith in something more than money,
Yeah.
myself. These things were really my faith and my discipline and the willingness to make sacrifice.
Yeah.
If you can figure out how to implement those things,
Yeah.
I think you're much more equipped to face whatever challenges
Sure.
that your listeners are going to face. The bottom line is everybody eventually is going to face something.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Everybody
that's
eventually is going to is going to face some sort of headwind.
if I had to say over the course of the show, what the number one thing I've pulled out from guests, it would definitely be, as far as what helped them get through this adversity. It would definitely be focusing on being a part of something bigger than themselves, and that could be, you know, faith, but certainly I would say, if I look back at all the episodes I've done, I think every single guest that faced major adversity and got through that, they shifted their focus at some point away from themselves. Not to
Mm,
say that, not to say you should never focus on yourself or never, accept that you're in pain, but eventually you get to a point where you're focused on others and impact, and that's just an observation, from my
yeah,
standpoint. So
yeah,
um
I
um
agree. I don't disagree at all.
I'm going to fire off some rapid fire questions. Are you good with that?
Yeah, yeah.
All
Go
right.
ahead. We're ready.
What's one thing that people misunderstand about you, Bryan?
um, that's funny. I honestly, because after dealing with what I'm dealing with, I don't really give a damn what I put it
That's
out there, and I really don't. I
yeah.
take zero stock in how you're gonna receive it and how people
Hmm.
perceive me or receive me. That's not my job. Is worrying about. If that was my job and something that I did do, I would have to get up at 1 instead of 3 or 4 in the morning. Because
Yeah.
just preparing my day, worrying
Yeah.
about how people think of me. So
Sure.
I don't. I
Okay.
don't.
No, I love that. That's a great answer. Um, what would you say is one of you may frame it differently, but what's one of your biggest failures or regrets in your life?
Uh, again, every one of those have helped shape me. So
Sure.
I don't have any. So if it
Okay.
wasn't for the failure, then I
Sure.
wouldn't be. I don't think I would have been disciplined enough. I don't think. I don't think I would have been disciplined enough
Sure.
to face down some of the stuff that I faced down. If it hadn't been for the challenges of always being the underdog, would I had been prepared to face the brain tumor?
Sure.
Some may argue yes. Some may. I personally, knowing me, I would say no. So
Hmm.
I don't, the failures that I have, I've learned to accept those and look upon them not as failures, but
Hmm.
as building blocks to help develop my character and who I am.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. If you could have coffee with any historical figure, who would it be?
Could have coffee with anybody, who would it be? I
Exactly.
mean, obviously for me, the obviously I would love, half of the stories you read in the Bible, I would have loved to be able to. But honestly, that's tough. I glean from so many different individuals. There's so many great influencers out there. You know, that's just a tough. That's a tough. I don't. I mean, it
Okay.
it depends
No
on the day.
worries.
If I'm working on my golf game, hell, I'm gonna tell you, man, I'd love to sit with Tiger Woods.
Yeah.
If I'm in this kind of like a philosophy thinking phase, it's gonna be, I'd love to sit down with some days it might be Muhammad Ali, or there's.
Nice.
I wish I
Yeah.
could tell you, but
No worries. That's
there's
good.
a ton of people I would have
Yeah.
loved to sit down with, man.
And maybe
Not
maybe
just one.
throw David Goggins in there maybe too.
Yeah, but he says he's so shy, so I don't think he's,
Okay. Yeah.
I think he opens up more, on the. I don't want any parts of David Goggins, man, because he might have you doing push-ups and
Yeah,
pull-ups.
right. That's true. There's
Yeah,
no time for conversation. No.
yeah, exactly.
So I know you have a book that's done very well. If you had to write another book this year, what would it be about?
And that's a great question, because I am going to write another book this year.
Okay.
Um, it's going to be more of a multifamily, investing in multifamily, kind of like an almanac, plus a mixture of my personal story and several
Okay.
people that I think I've impacted um, in their lives, their stories. So yeah, that's
That's
what it's
great.
going to be about.
Awesome. Speaking of your business, what's one challenge that you're facing in your business right now?
Well, it wouldn't be a business if it wasn't multiple challenges. So if it was just one challenge, man, life would be so much. I wouldn't have to get up at 4. I could get up at 8. Like, but yeah, I think the challenge for me in the space is, the being able to figure out how to be comfortable with yourself and your message when there's so much messaging going on out in the marketplace.
Mm.
There's a new guru, a new expert every
Hmm.
week. There's somebody on social media, that's an expert in
Sure.
multifamily all of a sudden.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like understanding how to navigate, that, it's taken me a while to just say, you know what, you have to, and I've heard Gary Vee say this, the heck with what all the noise is, you focus on what's in front of you.
Sure.
And so just realizing how to focus on what's in front of me and getting my message out, whether that be one person or 100 or 100,000,
Hmm.
that the idea has to be, when you're starting a business, to focus on if it's one client, you focus on that one client, because if you can't
Hmm.
service one client, you can't service 10, and if you
Hmm.
can't service 10, you can't service 100, so on and so forth. So just making sure that you understand and really stay to your strengths and what your
Sure.
passions are and what you think your message is.
Hmm.
Even though there's so many millions of other messengers, you just have to believe in your message, that it's going
Sure.
to resonate with the right audience.
That's great. Since you've been in real estate and multifamily for 2 decades, it sounds like, um, do you have any thoughts on, I'm not asking you to predict the future per se, but what do you think, what are you doing in your business based on market conditions right now?
Yeah, I the future is, I can predict the future. The future is going to be unpredictable. So there's my
There you go.
here's my market analysis. But the unpredictability of any market is where you find, when you're a great operator and
Hmm.
you really understand. And I'm not talking about the major topics that are out there right now in multifamily, which is acquiring deals and raising money. I'm talking about operations. When you've mastered the ability to navigate what I consider all 5 phases: the acquisition phase, the implementation, stabilization, growth, and exit strategy. When you've been able to master the ability to navigate those 5 phases, when there's adversity, you like the adversity. It's like, again, I'll give you another golf analogy. When the winds pick up and the greens are fast and the course conditions are tough, you like that, because the field, if you are behind, the field comes to you, because people are going to start losing strokes. People are negative. Oh, it's windy. They're going to let that get in their head. Oh, the greens are too fast. They're going to let that get in their head. See, some people can't face down adversity, but because of this story, and this is the whole reason behind your podcast. Yeah. Adversity, I find advantages in adversity. I mean, look at my story. In itself, I find advantages in adversity. So in the marketplace, the same thing is applicable. I find where others start falling and they start letting the wind get in their head, and the greens being too fast get in their head, and their strokes, they start losing strokes, and the field starts coming back to you. That's when I pick up. That's when I see opportunity to go for the juggler. And it's the same thing in this market. I don't care what we're faced with: high inflation, higher interest rates. Yeah, somebody's going to unlock the key and find the projects that make sense. You're going to find markets and projects that make sense for every market, and you just have to be a really sound in your fundamentals, being able to navigate those 5 phases. Got it. That's the key.
Yeah, that's great. That reminds me of somebody I interviewed on my previous podcast, Dave Van Horn. He's been in the note space for a long time.
Yeah, I know Dave.
Do you
Big
know?
Dave.
Okay.
Yeah, Big Dave. Yeah.
He mentioned something like, as far as politics or, legislation being passed that might affect real estate and notes and things. He's like, I don't just tell me. He said something like, tell me what the rules are and I'll figure out a way to win. I don't really care what the conditions
just tell
are.
Me, that's it. What the rules are. Exactly.
Because he's been around for so long and he's got his fundamentals down.
That's it.
And it's slow moving enough that you can react and implement a plan based on what's changing around you.
Back to the golf analogy. If you're fundamentally sound, you know how to strike the ball. You're fundamentally sound. You can put the ball in the fairway. Listen, man, the course conditions, what I mean, they might affect you. But if you're mentally tough and you're fundamentally sound, brother, just point me in the right direction, and we can go low.
Love it. That's great. As we wrap up here, because I know you're a busy guy. And what is one book or two that you'd recommend for my audience?
First of all, buy it, rent it, profit.
There you go.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention my own book. But there's several books I love, several books I listen to. I don't understand the philosophy of, and maybe because it's me, but I don't understand the philosophy of reading many books. Guys I see on social media sometimes point to hundreds and hundreds of books. I guess they have capacity. I don't have that. I will get me 3 or 4 books and read them for the next 10 years. And because it takes me a minute to implement them. So if you're like that, I get The Richest Man in Babylon. I like the E-Myth. I'm always diving into the Bible and looking for lessons. Awesome. Those I would say outside of my book, probably the greatest book of all for me personally is the Book of 5 Rings. Okay. The Book of 5 Rings. It's about a samurai, Miyamoto Musashi, probably Japan's greatest samurai, wrote a book called the Book of 5 Rings, Go Ring No Show. And right before he passed away, he had like something of 20 something duels, 17 to 20 something duels. Of course, back then they dueled to the death. So, pretty good record. Good, but then he wrote this book, and it's a book of strategy. And that has helped me with my mental mindset. So if you really love that, you can get it on audio, but it's called the Book of 5 Rings.
That's a great one. I'll have to check that out. I hadn't heard that one. I think I've heard of it, but I hadn't.
It's not for everybody because, it's the samurai and it's a book, it's strategy. And it's, but, if you're kind of a fan of The Art of War, which would be another book, but if you're a fan of those Zen leaderships, there's a book too. If you're a fan of that type of philosophy, then you would appreciate the Book of Five Rings.
Got it. That's great. What is one question that you wish I'd asked that I haven't asked?
I don't I don't. This was your show, so I don't. I
Is
react.
there?
I react. So
Got it.
no,
No,
I don't.
it's been great. I love it. If there's anything you want to cover before we sign off, feel free. Um,
I think
got
you did a great job. I
okay.
think
Well,
your
I appreciate
podcast
that.
is should be well received, and I think stories of adversity and listening to others face adversity is something that's really important, especially with social media.
Yeah,
Everybody putting their best foot forward.
sure.
Um, that's what social media is all about, and there's a place for that. There's a place to brag and put your
Right.
best foot forward and put a filter on, and there's a place for that, and there's a time for that. But too much of that, too much consumption of that, and seeing people winning all the time can make you feel really small. If you are an entrepreneur like me, things are really slow. So you might start out parring every hole, and you just may be a slow start, right? And that's negative, and you feel that watching that on social media, that everybody's so far, so much farther ahead of you. So
Sure.
being able to have a podcast like this that kind of talks about adversity, taking the filters off, taking the rah-rah out of it,
Yep.
I think is really important. I think you're doing a great job. So kudos to you, and I wish you all the success in yourself, your business, and your family, and with your
Thank you.
podcast moving forward.
Really appreciate that, Brian. That's awesome. Where can our listeners find you online?
I have a YouTube channel, Bryan Chavis. If you just type in Bryan Chavis, you'll find our YouTube. I do a wonderful podcast myself called By the Block. Every Thursday, I do a Facebook Live for everyone. Every Thursday, live training every Thursday on Facebook Live. And then you can always find me on Buy It, Rent It, Profit. If you ever want to schedule a strategy call, you just go to buyitrentitprofit.com, and you can also find me in any bookstore throughout the world. Just go to the real estate section and look for Buy It, Rent It, Profit.
There you go. Love it. Fantastic, Brian. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending your time with us today. Good luck on the course, if that's today or tomorrow when when you hit the
A
links
little
next.
practice today. We're headed into Golf Tech now. It's a little practice, but
Nice.
we thank you. We appreciate it. Need all the luck we get.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us, and really appreciate it.
Thank
And
you, man. I appreciate you.
to the listeners out there, thank you all for spending your most valuable resource with us, and that is your time. Thanks, everyone. Take care.